We are cutting through the noise and going straight to the core of the articles, the research, and the notes you've shared with us. Our mission today is a really comprehensive deep dive into one of the most powerful and, I think, enduring American novels, Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. The story of this book is it's completely inseparable from the story of its own history. The one sentence that I think makes this book absolutely essential for us today is this. It's the story of the most hated book of the 1930s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was branded a literary betrayal of its race,
Yeah.
and somehow it transformed into one of the most vital American masterpieces of the 21st century.
It's an incredible reversal.
And that journey from condemnation to, canonization,
Yeah.
that's what we're here to unpack.
It's such a critical journey, and to really get it, you have to look at the ideological battlefield of 1937. When this came out, it wasn't just criticized,
Yeah.
it was condemned. I mean, Hurston was attacked by her own contemporaries for what they saw as an uncompromising refusal to turn her art into a political weapon.
That phrasing is so sharp. It's like art was supposed to have one specific job, and she just refused to do it. How intense was that pressure?
Oh, it was immense. You have to remember, this is the Great Depression. There are escalating political anxieties all over the globe. The literary establishment at the time, especially the most prominent voices in the Black literary movement, they were demanding what they called protest literature.
Yeah.
They needed books to be blunt instruments for social change, things that documented oppression and injustice.
And Hurston essentially said, no, thank you. I'm going to write about something else entirely.
Precisely. She dared to focus on, and I'm quoting here, the private interior soul of a Black woman. Her search for love, for identity, for her own voice.
When everyone else was demanding these big public political statements.
Exactly. And to them, that was seen as a complete dereliction of duty.
The sources cite Richard Wright, the titan behind Native Son, and he had one of the most blistering attacks. He said her novel lacked theme, message, or thought.
He even called it a minstrel show.
A minstrel show. Just designed to satisfy white audiences.
Yeah.
It's a complete dismissal of her artistry, her style, everything.
And this right here is where the relevance for you, the listener, in 2025 becomes so unavoidable. Let's unpack it. Hurston's struggle. This immense pressure to conform to a group agenda versus the courage to just be herself and explore her own authentic experience.
It's an early blueprint for the ideological wars we see playing out today.
Absolutely. She was being told that her personal joy, her self-discovery, it was all irrelevant if it didn't serve a specific political utility.
And her work argues the exact opposite, that the most profound universal truths are found not in slogans, but in the intensely personal, intimate voyage of an individual spirit. And that is the core tension we need to trace in the life of her protagonist, Janie Crawford.
It really is a heroic voyage of the spirit. It's a journey that spans decades and takes one woman from, the perceived safety of a protective cage all the way to the wild, dangerous horizons of self-discovery.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's get into the framework of the book. We should probably give a non-spoiler overview first, just to set the scene.
Sounds good. So the novel is set in early 20th century Florida, and the landscape itself is basically a character. It shifts between two really distinct worlds.
Right.
You have the structured, politically conscious community of Eatonville, and then you have the raw, untamed, really fluid landscape of the Florida Everglades, which the characters just call the muck.
Eatonville is so important to understand. The sources really emphasize that it was the first all-Black incorporated town in the United States.
It is vital, yeah.
So the people there, they operated with this unique sense of sovereignty. They were the mayors, the judges, the shopkeepers. So Janie didn't grow up experiencing life as a minority under a white power structure.
Exactly. She grew up as a citizen in a self-governed Black town, and that foundational sense of inherent self-possession, it profoundly shapes her worldview. It makes her later inability to find her own voice even more painful.
So what's the general premise?
It follows Janie Crawford's search over decades for a transformative, reciprocal love. It's a quest that starts with this childhood vision she has of a blossoming pear tree.
Ah, the pear tree. We'll definitely come back to that.
We have to. The novel tracks her spiritual growth through three very different relationships, showing how she struggles to reconcile her private, internal desires with the rigid, judging expectations of her community.
And the opening is just It's immediately captivating. It sets up that core conflict perfectly.
It does. The novel begins with Janie returning to Eatonville after being gone for a long time. She's wearing overalls,
Which is a symbol in itself.
a huge symbol of her hard-won, unconventional experience, and she immediately faces the collective judgment of the townspeople who are all watching her from their porches.
Hurston's description of them is perfect. She says their tongues are cocked and loaded with gossip.
Yes.
It just establishes right away that this whole heroic journey is going to be fought on the battleground of public perception versus private truth. Okay, now, we need to get into the major movements of Janie's life, which means we have to give a clear spoiler warning.
Yes.
We're about to discuss the trajectory of her relationships, the central climax, and the profound tragedy that defines her ending and ultimately her return home.
So Janie's life is really structured by these three relationships, and each one is like a necessary, often painful, education on her path to self-possession. The first one, with Logan Killix, is born entirely out of fear.
Right, it's arranged by her grandmother, Nanny.
Yes, and Nanny has a lifetime of fear and trauma informing her choices. She just desperately wants Janie to have protection, security. She's terrified of the vulnerability and exploitation that a young, unattached Black woman would face in the world.
So security is the highest value.
For Nanny, it is. She believes a big house, a farm, money that equals safety. But for Janie, this secure union immediately just becomes stagnation. Logan treats her like property.
He doesn't see her at all.
Not really. He expects her to be a wife, but there's no emotional reciprocity. Janie feels her spirit just starving inside this secure cage, and you see her pushing back almost immediately, like when he demands she go chop wood, trying to mold her into a subservient helper.
And that stagnation is shattered by the arrival of Joe Starks.
Yeah.
He's this figure of immense, almost blinding ambition. He promises her a bigger life. They go to Eatonville, and he takes over. He becomes the mayor, the richest guy in town.
Joe represents a very specific kind of American success story, right? The self-made man who built an empire. But the sources are so clear about the tragic cost of this ambition. As his power grows, he puts Janie on this metaphorical pedestal.
Right, she becomes the lady.
Exactly. She's this untouchable display piece whose main job is just to reflect his status.
That's the tragedy of his ambition. He basically suffocates the very vitality that attracted him to Janie in the first place. He won't let her participate in the community life, the storytelling on the porches.
And this is where we have to talk about that idea of the curse of too muchness. Joe Starks' materialism, his need for absolute control, that too muchness literally suffocates the spiritual and social life of his own household. He demands silence and reverence from Janie,
Starving her.
completely starving her of emotional connection and refusing to let her have a voice. He thinks his wealth and authority should automatically make her happy, but his desire to rule this, kingdom of one leaves him profoundly lonely.
And it ultimately kills the connection between them.
It does. And Janie eventually finds the courage to confront him. It's a huge moment, her finding her voice. And shortly after that, he dies, leaving Janie wealthy, but
Emotionally hollow.
completely. And this vacuum is what allows for the thrilling romantic crescendo of Tea Cake.
Tea Cake.
He's years younger, totally statusless. He's a gambler, musician, a migrant worker, but he represents absolute, unfettered freedom. He is the first person who sees Janie not as property or a status symbol, but as an equal human being.
And the moment that defines their relationship is so simple, but it's so profound.
The checkers game.
He invites her to play checkers. It's this symbolic invitation to partnership, to equality, instead of submission.
And Tea Cake brings this fluid, anarchic energy into her rigid life. She leaves the security of Eatonville for the wild, dangerous horizons of the muck, the Everglades, and there she learns to fish, to play dominoes, to truly live.
But to be fair, the sources also make it clear that Tea Cake isn't perfect, right? He's not just a romantic hero.
Not at all. He's human, he's flawed, and he represents the inherent danger of that wild freedom. We see moments of patriarchal control. I mean, he steals money from her shortly after they get together. He can be jealous, even violent.
So it's not a fairy tale.
No, and that's what makes it so powerful. Their relationship is a partnership of equals, but it's a volatile, real one. It reflects the unpredictability of the muck itself.
And this beautiful, volatile relationship, it leads directly to the monumental climax of the novel, the hurricane.
Oh, Hurston's description of the hurricane is a masterpiece of sensory detail. It's this moment where human status, wealth, hierarchy, It's all completely stripped away. People who thought they were better than others are suddenly side by side. They're just totally exposed, staring into the face of a force beyond their control.
And this is where the title comes from. As they confront this overwhelming power of nature, they realize their eyes were watching God.
It's a raw, profound confrontation with the divine, a moment of universal vulnerability that changes Janie's perception of the world forever.
But out of that chaos comes this staggering tragedy.
It's just devastating. In the flood, Tea-Cake saves Janie from a rabid dog, but in the process, he gets bitten.
And we then witness this. I mean, it's a classical devastating tragedy. The rabies takes hold, and it slowly transforms the man she loves, with the man who taught her freedom,
Into a creature of pure, mindless aggression. The source material talks about the horror of watching him descend into madness, the foam at the mouth, the terrifying glare. He becomes the very kind of unpredictable creature her grandmother had warned her against.
and Janie is forced to kill him to save her own life.
It's the ultimate act of self-possession. She has to choose herself, her survival, her own individual truth over her great love.
So she returns to Eatonville, not defeated, but as someone who has completed this spiritual voyage. The gossip on the porches, it doesn't sting anymore.
No, she has, as the book says, been to the horizon and back, and she's pulled that horizon like a great fishnet and draped it over her shoulders. She achieved her freedom, but at an immense, immense personal cost.
To really appreciate that heroic journey, you have to look at the extraordinary woman who created it. I mean, people loved the human story behind the book. What made Zora Neale Hurston such a fiercely sovereign writer?
Her foundation was Eatonville, Florida. We touched on this, but growing up in the first all-Black incorporated town, it gave her this innate sense of self-governance. She wasn't just observing a minority experience. She was living in a Black world where Black people held all the power and defined their own culture.
So she wasn't taught to fight for her right to exist. She was taught that she was the center of her own universe.
Exactly. And her father was a preacher, a carpenter, a man of powerful musical oratory. He was even the mayor for a time. But it was her mother who gave her the directive that would guide her life. She urged Zora to jump at the sun.
Wow.
And that fierce pursuit of light and freedom became her guiding principle.
But that foundation shattered pretty early on.
Yeah, it did. After her mother died and her father remarried, Zora was basically cast out. She spent years in exile, moving between relatives, working jobs as a maid, struggling just to finish her education.
So she had this internal sovereignty, this wealth of culture, but she was facing this external hardship in exile.
Yes, which makes her protagonist, Janie, very much a mirror of her own experience. But through all that instability, she retained what the sources call the poet's gift for language, the ability to hear and remember the musical cadence of the Southern oral tradition.
And by the 1920s, she gets to New York.
She arrives in New York determined to succeed. She becomes the only Black student at Barnard College studying anthropology under the legendary Franz Boas.
So that's where her intellectual rigor meets her cultural passion. Did that training influence her refusal to write protest literature?
Absolutely. Boas was the father of modern American anthropology, and he emphasized cultural relativism, the idea that every culture has to be understood on its own terms, not judged against some superior Western standard. Zora took that theory and applied it to her own people.
And this is an amazing anecdote from the sources. She didn't just study from an armchair in New York.
No way. She went undercover, into the heart of the South. She traveled with a pistol in her purse and a recording device. The danger of a lone Black woman traversing the rural South in the 1920s, you just can't overstate it.
And what she found weren't just academic data points.
Not at all. She saw the people she interviewed not as primitive subjects, but as the inheritors of this incredibly rich, sophisticated oral tradition, a mythology that was every bit as significant as the Greek myths of Homer.
And she formalized the lying sessions.
Yes. The informal gatherings on storefront porches where men would tell tall tales and jokes. She recognized that as the community's high art, their way of understanding their place in the universe.
Her whole life story, from Eatonville to Barnard to the dangers of her fieldwork, it shows exactly why she was the only one who could write a book that celebrated the common folk's beauty while refusing to define them just by their suffering.
She was an artist of observation and preservation, not propaganda.
which connects directly back to the bigger picture, the historical and cultural conflict that led to the book being condemned in the first place.
You have to understand that clash of artistic philosophy. You had titans like Richard Wright,
Yeah.
whose novel Native Son was the quintessential protest novel. It was externally focused, a harrowing indictment of systemic racism. It served the political function the establishment demanded.
And Wright's critique of Hurston was essentially that her work was frivolous because it was internally focused. He saw her use of dialect, her focus on love, as just a distraction. The core accusation was that she was performing for a white audience.
Right. Showing a lighthearted, less serious side of Black life. Yet Hurston's genius was her refusal to accept that either mandate. She wasn't looking to New York for inspiration. She was looking to the storefront porches of the South.
And in doing so, she proved that profound universal truths about identity, love, freedom are found in the deeply personal journey, not just in political slogans.
This book, at the end of the day, is a window into a vanishing world. Like James Joyce's Ulysses redefined Dublin, their eyes were watching God redefine what was worthy of high literary art in the rural American South.
So let's move to the heart of this deep dive. The themes and big ideas that make this novel last, regardless of its original context.
Okay. The foundational theme has to be the quest for self-possession. Janie's entire journey is about finding a way to belong to herself. Not to a husband, not to her grandmother's fears, not to the community's expectations.
And that search starts with the image of the pear tree, which is the central symbol.
That image is key. She sees it in her youth, the marriage of the bees and the flowers. It symbolizes perfect, reciprocal love, a mutually transformative experience. It's pure wonder and harmony, and it sets her emotional compass for her entire life. Every relationship is an attempt to get back to that moment of grace.
But that private internal desire is constantly battered by the tension between the individual and the community.
And the Eatonville porches are the physical manifestation of that conflict. They're the Greek chorus, the eyes with tongues cocked and loaded with judgment. They represent the pressure to conform, to uphold a respectable image. Janie has to learn to ignore them to achieve her freedom.
Another huge theme is the struggle for voice and silencing. Her emotional growth is literally tracked by her ability to speak her truth.
And her voice is literally silenced by Joe Starks. When he puts her on that pedestal, he starves her verbally. He doesn't want her commenting. He doesn't want her contradicting him. When she finally finds the courage to publicly challenge him on the porch, it's emotionally explosive. It's the first time she reclaims her verbal autonomy since marrying him.
Which brings us back to that core dilemma: security versus freedom. The choice Nanny forced on her.
The grandmother chose the safety of a protective cage, the marriage to Logan, born out of historical fear. Janie spends her life rejecting that fear-based security, instead choosing the wild, dangerous horizons of self-discovery she finds with tea cake in the muck. The book really asks, what good is protection if your soul is starving?
Okay, let's talk about the characters themselves because they are so brilliantly realized, starting with Janie Crawford.
Janie is this spiritual orphan, seeking to fill the void left by a complex heritage. She's driven by that yearning for the pear tree vision, searching for a path back to herself after being exiled from her own desires.
Her transformation is staggering. It spans decades, moving her from this vulnerable girl defined by others' expectations into a woman who has been to the horizon and back. Her struggle to find her own voice resonates so profoundly today.
And then you have Joe Starks, the king. He's the archetype of immense tragic ambition. He wants to build something sovereign in Eatonville, but his royal authority demands total submission.
His flaw is so classic. His desire for status, that too-muchness, blinds him to Janie's humanity. He achieves material success, but he rules this profoundly isolated, lonely kingdom of his own making. He dies spiritually long before he dies physically.
And tea cake is his complete antithesis, the equalizer. Defined by his ability to see Janie as a person, inviting her into a true partnership, he brings this fluid, anarchic energy into her structured life.
But, as we said, his tragedy is tied to the danger of that same wildness. His descent into madness from rabies is an act of nature, transforming the man she loves into a creature of pure aggression, the embodiment of the untamed external forces that threaten her.
It's true. Yeah.
This powerful story is held together by Hurston's revolutionary craft. We have to talk about the literary techniques that shocked her contemporaries.
This is where she reinvented the American novel, the dialect revolution. Hurston proved that a sophisticated modernist work could be written using the specific cadence and speech of a Florida worker. This was radical.
She legitimized a language that had only been used in caricature before. Can you give an example of how she elevates it?
Certainly. Think about the description of the townspeople. The people sat on the porch and passed around the pictures of their minds for the others to look at and see. That structure, that vivid image, it's taken directly from the lying sessions she recorded. Her prose is lush, sensory, elevating common speech to the level of a Shakespearean sonnet.
She captured the expressive power of a language that was previously dismissed as just dialect.
And in doing so, she validated the culture it sprung from as worthy of serious literary attention. Another key technique is her narrative style, this shared soul. The narrator and Janie are so intimately linked that you feel like you're trapped inside her heartbeat. The voice slips seamlessly from a sophisticated third person into Janie's personalized internal thoughts.
And then, of course, the dense symbolism carries so much weight.
The symbols are anchors for her spiritual growth. The pear tree for reciprocal love, the porches for judgment, the muck for wild vitality, and the hurricane for that terrifying confrontation with the divine.
All of which brings us back to the great tragedy and ultimate vindication of Zora Neale Hurston. We need to look at the reception. Then versus now.
Initially, it was condemnation. It was treated as an eccentric outlier, a frivolous distraction from the serious issues of the day.
And the fallout for Hurston was devastatingly cruel. Her refusal to conform led to her being ostracized, especially as the political climate hardened in the 50s. Her books slowly went out of print.
The sources paint such a tragic picture of her final years. It's a heart-wrenching irony for an artist of her stature. She died in complete poverty in 1960. She was working as a maid in a hotel.
I can't even imagine.
Her neighbors had to take up a collection just to cover her funeral expenses. And she was buried in an unmarked grave in a Florida welfare cemetery, forgotten by the world she had so beautifully documented.
It's almost unbelievable that an artist who gave such an eloquent voice to her people died in such quiet neglect. She was ahead of her time, and the political climate just discarded her.
But the story doesn't end there. The modern view is one of a profound global resurrection. Today, she's not just respected, she's a foundational touchstone for the entire American literary tradition. This book is mandatory reading all over the world.
And the moment that sparked this resurrection is a piece of literary history itself.
It is. In 1973, the writer Alice Walker, who was deeply influenced by Hurston, traveled to Florida, determined to find that unmarked grave, this emotional act of, as she put it, searching for a mother in a literary sense. It sparked a global rediscovery. Walker reintroduced Hurston's work to the world.
And Hurston's influence today is just massive. She paves the way for generations of writers, not just by legitimizing the language of the common folk, but by showing that the Black experience is vast and doesn't have to be confined to trauma narratives.
Right. And why this book matters so much today is fundamentally about choice. In a world that often demands we choose between the individual and the crowd, security and authenticity, Hurston showed that we can only find ourselves when we learn to speak our own truth. And, critically, when we refuse to let characters be defined only by their suffering.
Reflecting on this whole journey, from condemnation to canonization, what struck me most was the sheer cost of her authenticity. Hurston died in poverty, but she possessed the one thing her critics couldn't buy or bully: her own soul. That authenticity cost her everything externally, but it gave the world this enduring story of internal freedom.
If you approach the book today, pay close attention to that shift in language we talked about. Notice how it changes as Janie moves from the rigid world of Joe Starks to the fluid, musical energy of Tea Cake. The style itself mirrors her internal liberation.
And knowing the context that this book was an act of profound artistic defiance, it just makes the whole story hit differently. It's not a simple love story, it's an act of artistic sovereignty.
So who will truly enjoy this? I think anyone who appreciates a quiet, staggering tragedy about identity over, sprawling warfare. And anyone who is deeply interested in the revolutionary power of language itself.
We'll leave you with the core question this novel poses, a question that rings so true today. Jeannie returns home, not with validation from the porch, but with her horizon tucked under her arm. She no longer needs the eyes of others to define her journey.
And the challenge to you, the listener, is profound. Are we brave enough to go find our own horizon, regardless of the criticism and judgment from the porches that surround us? What cost are we willing to pay for that self-possession?
That is our deep dive into Zora Neale Hurston's enduring masterpiece. We hope you feel equipped now to approach this novel with the context, the insight, and the appreciation for the radical artistry it truly deserves.